Welcome to the EMN podcast, where philosophy meets disaster and uncomfortable truths meet the profession we call emergency management. This is not safe space thinking. This is the arena. Let's begin. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are at. And if you noticed on that intro, Dan Scott is not sitting in the co-host seat. We got Brian Colburn. Dan, unfortunately, can't be with us today. Dan, we wish you well. And I know you're listening. And well, Brian Colburn is here. And you guys probably have seen or remember Brian from other things we've done. Brian, thanks for filling in.
Hey, happy to be here, Todd. Thanks for thinking of me.
Hey, man. So we've talked about this in the past and other things. And I know you, as running 911 calls in the world, understand what normalcy bias is. Why I'm stumbling right now. I'm stumbling because I think of like how we get out of normalcy bias in the military, being a Marine, that we get trained quickly, repetition, not to fall into it. Right. And we all still do, right? You hear the bomb go off, you hear the gunshot, we all freeze and then act. Right. What is normalcy bias to you, and how do we break that cycle?
In reading the article you published yesterday, the one thing that popped into my mind right away was the phrase complacency kills.
Mm-hmm.
And, factor that into normalcy bias. And I think it's just a level of comfort. We get comfortable with the way things are going, and we're pushing file folders across our desk, and we're getting the work done we need to get done. We don't stop to step back and take a view, that 10,000 foot view of everything that's going on.
Yesterday was the anniversary of the mass shooting that I responded to in Orange County, California. And I tell the story a lot, but I'll tell it again, that when the reports came in of shots fired, the first thing I said was, it has to be fireworks. In the town where I worked, in the area that we're in, there's no way someone was shooting. And as I couldn't, my brain did not engage in that, and ended up being the worst mass shooting in Orange County history. And that's normalcy bias, right?
Absolutely.
Day to day. Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. We think of things when something unusual happens, we default to it's probably this. And, for day-to-day living, it's okay to think of that. But when lives are in your charge, we need to condition ourselves to not fall into that complacency or that normalcy bias. And yeah, fireworks is it's got to be fireworks. This is, one of the smallest cities in Orange County. Nothing bad ever happens here. Maybe a traffic collision. We don't think it's going to be a mass shooter. We don't think that it turns out to be the largest mass shooting in Orange County history. So, but it did.
So how do we fall into that? I mean, it's a two-part question, Brian. How do we fall into that trap of the normalcy bias, and then and complacency? Complacency is one thing. We'll get into that in a second, but let's talk about normalcy bias first. How do we fall in that trap of normalcy bias, and then how do we break that? And I know there's two tools that we could talk about. One is the OODA loop, and then if we take a look at Eric McNulty's pop doc loop. But how do we mentally prepare ourselves to break that loop?
I think it's a matter of training. That let me go back to the ambulance days.
Mm-hmm.
You get set to go be support for a structure fire. Yeah, we could pull up, we could turn the ambulance. Maybe not even turn the ambulance around. We pull up, yep, we're here. Firefighters are doing their thing. We're just hanging out. Or we can think, Worst case, let's think of the types of patients we may have. Let's orient the ambulance so we're pointed in a direction to a local hospital that can handle, severe burns or things of that nature. Let's jump in the back and open the doors and get the burn kits out and get the tools we have at our disposal to treat the potential patients we may be seeing.
Mhm.
Oxygen's good, masks are ready. It's that. And when we think worst case and we set up for worst case, when this rolled ankle comes because a firefighter tripped over his hose, we're good to go. It's least case possible. But when we set up, I know that didn't make sense. When we set up for worst case, we're golden. But that falls back onto training.
Right.
Maybe in the world of emergency management, when we're sitting at a desk and putting plans together for if this, then this, if this, then this, what about if the EOC is compromised? Do we train for that? Or do we have a plan for that? Having a plan is one thing. Training is a totally different beast.
No, absolutely. I agree with you on the training versus planning. And I think the other thing with normalcy bias, I think this is where we get into complacency, is the concept of we've always done it that way.
Mhm.
We've always done it this way. Oh, we've always done it this way. I think that one there it's a killer. When we don't allow our team to think outside of, I hate to use this term, the proverbial box, if you will. But if you don't let our team, when we have the failure of imagination in the training, right? Like you're just saying, when we train for, okay, this is the way it always is done. We're gonna train earthquake. We have an earthquake drill coming up on the 16th, right? This week. It's always done it this way. We do the shake out, we go into our desks, we take some whatever, and then that's it. If we don't allow for the imagination to play into it, I think this is where complacency comes into. I think when you have normalcy bias and complacency that hits together, that right there is the nail in the coffin.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And over the weekend we had a helicopter crash in a local city, and it's interesting to me because I sit back and the adjacent work I do for EMN, kind of opens this can of emergency management. Was that even a scenario on the table? Let's bring a bunch of cars and helicopters together in one spot. Was that a contingency plan, or was that oh crap, this happened? Well, fire's going to do their part. Police is going to do their part,
Yeah. And first of all, the amazing part about that helicopter crash, just for everybody, if you guys want to take a look, it's on YouTube. Huntington Beach, California, a helicopter crash occurred. Visually speaking, it was traumatic, right? It was dramatic. I was about to say dramatic and traumatic at the same time. It was dramatically visually looking. No one got hurt. Well, some people got hurt. No one got killed. And that was amazing. Yeah, I would venture to guess that hotel that it's crashed into never had on its planning docket helicopter crash into our hotel.
Absolutely.
I would think that they never planned that.
Absolutely. And then it crashed on the side of the hotel, which is a very busy, congested highway.
Yeah.
Getting vehicles into it, emergency response vehicles into it, probably was a challenge, being a cars and helicopters event. Yeah, but it's one of those things as an emergency manager, somebody in that position, it's like, well, what is the worst case? In my security days, we used to look at venues, events, routes, and think worst case, and have secondary and tertiary routes and hospitals and everything available. Todd, you and I worked as set medic, lack of better terms, for a shooting competition. Yeah. And I step in and I'm handed a checklist of, this is what we have, this is the local hospital. And a question popped into my mind. does this hospital, is it even a trauma center? Because
Right.
of the injuries we could expect to have. Yeah, rolled ankle, worst case, a GSW. And come to find out, they weren't even a trauma hospital. And the trauma hospital is another mile and a half down the road. Well, that changes planning. That
Right.
changes everything. So, um, it's those minor details that, when overlooked, bad things happen. And that's where OODA loop, pop doc, and just stepping back and taking that 10,000-foot view, what can be expected? And if we plan for this, we're going to be better off than just, oh, we're good to go.
And the other side of that too is, were those hospitals aware that this competition was happening?
Absolutely.
Because did they, were they staffed up for the potential of it?
Absolutely.
And with my current position, we have large events right now, like every weekend. 80,000 people or so are coming to my city every weekend or more. There's, in the summertime, there are large concerts that are happening, things like this. My city that has one hospital, are they aware of these concerts? And I'm sure they're aware of the weekend things during the football season. But are they staffed up? So we're in communication with that hospital now. So they are aware of it, and they have the proper staffing and whatnot for these events. And it's a pretty busy hospital as it is. It's not a slow hospital by any means. Not a trauma center, but it is a busy hospital.
Just stepping away from emergency management for a minute, these tools, the OODA loop, pop doc, normalcy bias, these are things that can be applied to corporate America. They can be applied to the family outing to Disneyland for the holidays. I mean,
Yes.
we need to, and when I say we, me as a father needs to ensure that plans are in place to handle worst case scenario. It's my responsibility for the safety and security of my family when we're out in public, and taking a look at things and just not falling into that normalcy bias. Oh, somebody else will handle it, or somebody else is responsible for my safety. There's a level of personal responsibility that needs to come into the family dynamic, number one, but then the corporate America dynamic, and with so many technologically dependent companies out there right now, what if? What's that contingency plan? And now we're kind of leaning into business continuity. However, OODA loop, pop doc, these things in the planning phase can help prevent the loss of money, help prevent downtime, help prevent injury, there's so many things that prior proper planning can prevent.
You don't want to finish that one?
I'm good there, Todd.
Well, on that, going to the mall, for instance, just a mall trip. And these days, it sounds terrible these days, having that plan, especially, we're coming into the holiday season, talking to people about having that plan of escape. Even if it's, I don't want to even go to the point of active shooter, but just, God forbid, a fire or a mass. I mean, we've seen in the past, the Walmarts and whatnot being rushed for the free TV or the cheap TVs or whatever. People got crushed and died or got injured from these crushes. Understanding, escape routes or what to do in these type of events. And when my son was small, we went to a Star Wars event at the Hollywood Bowl. And when we were leaving, the mass crowd's leaving, and we took the bus there from, because parking's a bear. And so we had to go under this tunnel, and this mass of humanity, and we're part of that mass of humanity, is going under the tunnel. And I told my wife, hey, let's not be in the middle of this crowd. Let's walk along the wall. That way, if there was for whatever reason, something scared, we weren't going to be in the middle of this rush. And she's just like, "What are we doing?" I said, "Just walk along the wall. We'll be fine." When again, I'm planning for the in case. When we go to the movies, my son and I go to the movies together. We're still to this day. He's an adult now, and we talk about, hey, where's the closest exit? What happens if we get separated? How do we meet together? Amanda Ripley wrote this book about being the idea of it's called Surviving the Unthinkable, and she talks about the idea that if you just talk through those plans, you are able to break that normalcy bias loop, if you will, faster. Right. And like I said at the beginning of the show, it's not that those of us that are trained, and I'm guessing the majority of you that are listening to the show today have been trained of some, whether you're emergency manager or whatnot. Those of us that are trained don't fall into the normalcy bias like I did, right? And when the shooting happened, don't fall into that normalcy bias loop. It's the ability, like in the OODA loop, to be able to break that normalcy bias chain faster, right? Law enforcement officers, when you watch them in a shooting, if you see video of them, why are they able to react faster? Because they are able to recognize the threat, break the normalcy bias chain, and act, right? Military members, when they're able to do the same thing, break that chain and act, right?
But, I want to interject there for a second, because we've seen the shootings where the officer didn't react. They were completely in this normalcy bias. Mm-hmm. I'm walking up. How you doing? Driver's license, registration. The reason I stopped you. And next thing they know, they're lying on their back while they're suspects, fleeing.
True.
And no matter how much you train, when it's go time, you've got to put the go hat on. And that's all there is to it. And you need to be in a different mindset. You can't be thinking, did I feed the dogs this morning? Or is coffee still hot? Or it's go time. You've got to put that hat on and get to work and fall back on your train. Prime example, back in the ambulance business, labor and delivery calls, my nightmare. And it's like we get sent to an L&D call. I broke open my book and I'm reviewing labor and delivery procedure. Okay, APGAR. Yep. And making sure it's in my head. So when I roll up, I'm not, trying to figure out what to do. I've refreshed my memory on the way to the call. So it's fresh in my mind and I know how to handle the situation once I arrive. But not everybody does that.
No, not everybody does that. No, but you're right. I mean, but that again, when I'm speaking about this, there's always the outliers, right? But there are times, right? I mean, you think about the person who walks up with their hand on their gun, right? The officer, ready to go. They might be on the other side of that, that equation too, making that interaction completely uncomfortable and escalating the situation, right? So, the normalcy bias and the complacency on the other side is when, again, this is the way we've always done it. This is the way it's always happened. Nothing ever happens here. It's never going to happen. And this is one of the things in emergency management that we fight all the time. And I have this argument with people all the time as far as the complacency is, what are the chances? Earthquake. When was the last time that there was a large earthquake here? Was it 30 years ago? Large enough to cause some problems. Oh yeah. So this is crazy that we're spending all this money and time and effort planning for that earthquake. When was the last time that the Newport Inglewood fault erupted? Well, it was 1932. When was the last time the San Andreas Fault actually erupted? Which is, everybody's afraid of that one. So we're worried. Winter earthquake was in the 80s. We think about those, and everybody around goes, oh yeah. We had the small earthquakes for us. In California, we're talking in the fives. The last one we had, the 5.8 near me, I think it was, she's had to have been 9 years ago. That where we had some damage to some apartments and stuff like this, but still, and we had that 7. I'm the reason why I'm going through these numbers because these are large earthquakes, realistically, but there was no real damage done to outside of the area. We had that 7 that was up in near China Lake. That was in the middle of the desert, and pretty much only like one small town had some damage, and so no one talks about these things. So unless you're in that particular town. So my point about it is like it never's going to happen here. It's never going to, or it won't happen in my lifetime type things. So this complacency, again, that's another one that kills. So it's the other side, the other side of that coin of normalcy bias is complacency. And those two together, that's what really gets people. And those are the things that we have to fight when we're doing community outreach, or when we're asking for money for programs, because we can't prove a negative, right? When we go to the city council, we're going to the county council, we're asking for money for programs, we're going to the federal government to ask for money for programs, and we say, well, how do you prove that this worked? Well, how do you prove it? You can't prove a negative. So you have to prove that these programs are important. But the last 30, 40 years, nothing has occurred. How's this preparedness program working? And that's where normalcy, bias, and complacency really can, in our elected officials that are funding these programs, that's where things can really can make a difference. How do we, talk to them and prove that with our elected officials, Brian?
It's one of those things, statistics. I didn't hear any emergency management agency preparing us for a pandemic, even though they happen about every 100 years. It was, in my opinion, very much a reaction. Now, a lot of people have boned up for the bird flu and a few other things leading up to COVID, but it's proving the negative is the hard part. I mean, the fire department did a great job at fire prevention. They prevented themselves into smaller budgets and fewer fire stations back in the day. But it's the statistics. I heard a comedian one time say you could live through a 7.5 earthquake, nothing happened to you or your home, and it wasn't the big one. But that 3.5 knocks a brick off of a building you happen to be walking to, and that brick hits you into the head, kills you. That was the big one for you.
Right.
And yes, China Lake occurred and there was some damage out there. Here in the basin, we don't care. It was way out there. And there's been several earthquakes in Russia and in the Ring of Fire, as we call it,
the Philippines.
And yeah, that was just the other day.
Right.
And historically, we're gonna have another big one. That's all there is to it. When, we don't know, but we need to prepare for it. We need to prepare the people living in potentially impacted areas for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can point to those earthquakes that are happening around the Ring of Fire. I mean, Chile just had one. The Philippines, or Russia had a couple. Philippines had a couple of major ones. Yep. With some serious damage. But again, for the most people here, football was on yesterday.
Absolutely. I got my Starbucks and football games on. So
right. So if it's not interrupting your daily life, it is what it is. And when you start thinking that way, I mean, it's hard to prove that negative. And on the pandemic thing, I will push back a little bit about this. Emergency management, we were prepared. Public health was prepared. The public officials, we've had the pandemic flu plan. We didn't call it the COVID plan because we didn't know what COVID was. Right. We had that, we didn't, we had the pandemic flu plan. It was in our binders. If the people that we were giving these plans to actually read the plan, they would have known that we're prepared for it. And we had trigger points and stuff.
That's not to push back, but that sounds like a cop-out. We've discussed over the years how communication is always the top of the list in an accident.
Yeah, absolutely.
Report. But yet we communicate the same ways. We know it doesn't work. We can look back AR after AR after AR. We know this style of communication doesn't work, but what do? We continue to communicate in the same manner. That's normalcy bias, right?
Is that? Yeah, sure. I'll buy that.
Yeah. So what can we do to lead up and break city council, county, whatever, out of their normalcy bias to react in a positive manner towards this plan? How can that be better communicated?
Yeah, no, you're not wrong, and you know what, and that's one of those things. There's a whole nother topic about getting into. Our plans are 800, 900 pages thick, and no one's going to pick up that binder and read it. Because we pay a consultant to come and build it, and it goes on the bookshelf. And we check that box that the plan is built, and then when the disaster occurs or whatever, we don't even take the plan off the shelf and run it. So that's a whole other story. But no, there's a problem. That was it's part of the what I was about to get into was, yeah, but no one reads the plan. And so no one knows what's inside that plan, and we have to do a better job of normalizing and operationalizing those plans that we create. Because if we don't operationalize those plans, we're going to fall into that. And I think that's part of the reason why complacency occurs, is because we don't operationalize some of the stuff that we do. The nerds upstairs or whatever they want to call us, or downstairs, depending on where your office is, right? They know what they're doing, or that's what we have them for. But we don't normalize or socialize the plans, and that's, as I say before, is like get out from behind your keyboard and go and talk to people, and that's part of socializing that. And I think that's part of the complacency, right? I think even us as emergency managers, we get complacent of what we're doing, and I think that's critical. And I'm laughing a little bit because of this thumbs up keeps popping up on my screen. So that's part of this whole thing. So how as leaders, how can we get into the leadership of culture and I guess like make our teams not have that complacency bias, normalcy bias when it comes to normalcy bias. I think has to be a little bit harder, but like, at least the complacency side of it, like how do we get our team not to be complacent?
Wow. I actually wanted to continue talking about communications, but I know we're running short on time. At some level, we used to have a saying in the Corps: who motivates the motivator? And when it comes down to it, if you're being paid to manage, that's your job, and you've got to get up and put that hat on every morning and do your best to do the job. It's on you. It's on your shoulders. You are the emergency manager. And maybe it's a culture thing. Let's step back and take a look at the culture of those you report to and those that report to you. What can we do to improve that, to improve or snap out of a normalcy bias, or help improve, reduce the amount of normalcy in what it is you're doing? So many things goes back to communications. And as an emergency manager, you're there to generate a plan, sell it up, and sell it down. So understanding social selling can help you. It's not, I'm the emergency manager and this is what you do when this happens. That's the wrong approach, especially in today's time. I was the guy you said you need to do this. I'm going to figure out how to do it to the least of my ability, or you can't do this. Watch me. Hold my beer. I'm going to go do it. And today's culture just doesn't want to be told what to do. So it needs to be more of a partnership to get them to do what it is we need them to do, especially when crises occur.
Crises.
When bad things happen, we'll break it down.
Absolutely. again, the opposite of complacency is not really is not panic, it's awareness. I think we have to bring awareness to our team. I think when we start getting into National Preparedness Month, like we had last month, we're coming into the Great Shakeout on Thursday at 10:16 on 10:16. We had the National Awareness Month or Preparedness Month in September. Those things are critical for bringing the community and bringing your team together. Yes, go ahead, Brian.
A perfect point. We always do the Great Shakeout in the morning. What happens when there's an earthquake in the middle of the night? We're creating a sense of normalcy that earthquakes happen in the day, usually in the morning.
Well,
what happens when that earthquake happens in the middle of the night and there is no electricity and the street lights are all out? And
good point. Number one, last couple of earthquakes that did happened early morning. But it's hard to do an earthquake drill with your school or whatever, like, at night. So
are there talking points in that plan what to do middle of the night versus during the day?
Yeah, I mean, realistically,
the luxury of light is huge in an emergency.
Yeah, I mean, the education should be, it goes to home. We talk about home preparedness kits and stuff like this, and we do say have your stuff next to your bed. So I mean, the education does go home, but yeah, and then plus the catchy 10 a.m. on October's 10th month, and the 10th hour of the 10th, on the 10 or whatever the third Thursday of the month is. Come on, man, it's marketing.
Hey, I'm just saying, are we instilling a sense of normalcy in our training?
It doesn't always happen. Earthquakes don't always happen on the 10th.
Nope, not at all.
In October.
Not at all.
So don't start slagging the Earthquake Country Alliance and their earthquake drill day.
You know what? I'm gonna Google them and I'm gonna see if they have any language about if this occurs in the middle of the night, in the early morning hours.
Mark Benton, you're my friend. I appreciate you and I appreciate what your company's doing. Or what your organization is doing. Brian does not speak for me. Just saying. Don't get Mark mad at me.
Mark, I don't mean to offend. I'm just, discussing how maybe some of our plans and policies are generating some normalcy bias.
I even have a Great Shakeout coffee cup sitting on my shelf back here.
Does it come with a tether so you can tether it down so it won't shake off the shelf?
Oh, that's brilliant, Mark. Mark, that's the next marketing hack. All right. On that note, it's the end of the show. Brian, appreciate you stepping in for Brian for Dan. Dan, get well soon.
Get well, buddy.
And until next week, stay safe, stay hydrated.
When the sirens scream out loud, or the voice that breaks the cloud, heads held high when things go wrong, will guide you through its strength and song. Disaster strikes without a sound, chaos reigns but we're around. Public safety in our hands, standing strong in every land. Emergency management, we're the guide in the night.